At 08:47 on the morning of May 8, 1942, Lieutenant Stanley Vejtasa banked his Douglas SBD-3 Dauntless over the Coral Sea and watched 12 Japanese Zeros descend on his patrol. His aircraft was a dive bomber, 100 miles per hour, slower than the fighters attacking him. The Navy doctrine said what he was about to attempt was impossible. The Zeros came down in pairs, methodical, confident. They had spent 6 months destroying everything in the Pacific, from Pearl Harbor to the Philippines to the Dutch East Indies. No dive bomber had ever shot down a Zero in aerial combat. The mathematics said it could not happen. The training manuals said it should not be attempted. Vejtasa turned into the attack. 27 years earlier, Stanley Winfield Vejtasa was born on July 27, 1914, on a family homestead near the tiny town of Paris in eastern Montana's Macomb County. His parents were Czech immigrants who had carved a living from the harsh Montana prairie. The name Vejtasa, pronounced Vaitusu, meant nothing to the recruiters in the United States Navy. But it would come to mean something to Japanese fighter pilots. Paris, Montana had a population of fewer than 300. There was no airfield within 100 miles. The closest thing to aviation was watching hawks hunt jackrabbits over the wheat fields. Young Stanley learned to shoot before he learned to read. By age 12, he could hit a running rabbit at 75 yards with a .22 caliber rifle. A skill that would matter more than any flight instructor could have imagined. He attended Montana State College at Bozeman for 2 years, then transferred to the University of Montana in Missoula for 1 year. Money was scarce in the 1930s. The Depression had hollowed out rural Montana. A Navy recruiter came through campus in the spring of 1937, talking about flight training, about seeing the world, about a steady paycheck of $21 per month. Vejtasa enlisted on September 15, 1937, not because he dreamed of flying, but because he needed to eat. The Navy sent him to Pensacola, Florida, the cradle of naval aviation, where young men either learned to fly or washed out. Vejtasa had never been inside an aircraft, had never seen an aircraft carrier, had grown up closer to the Canadian border than to any ocean. But he had 2 things the Navy prized: exceptional hand-eye coordination and an instinct for deflection shooting honed on Montana jackrabbits. He received his Wings of Gold on July 13, 1939, and was commissioned an ensign on August 11, 1939. His first assignment was Scouting Squadron 5, VS-5, aboard the aircraft carrier USS Yorktown, CV-5, flying the obsolete Curtiss SBC-3 Helldiver biplane. The Helldiver was already outdated when Vejtasa climbed into the cockpit, an open cockpit biplane in an age of monoplanes. It cruised at 140 miles per hour and dove at 220, numbers that would soon seem luxurious. By late 1941, VS-5 had transitioned to the Douglas SBD Dauntless, a low-wing monoplane that represented the state-of-the-art in carrier-based dive bombing. The SBD-3 variant mounted 2 forward-firing 50 caliber machine guns synchronized to fire through the propeller arc, and a single 30 caliber machine gun on a flexible mount operated by the rear seat radio man. The Dauntless weighed 9,359 pounds fully loaded. It had a wingspan of 41 feet 6 inches, a top speed of 255 miles per hour at 14,000 feet, and a cruising speed of 152 miles per hour. Its effective range was 773 miles. Its dive bombing capability allowed delivery of a 1,000-pound bomb with remarkable accuracy. But it was not a fighter. The Navy had fighters. The Grumman F-4F Wildcat. The SBD was designed to find enemy ships, dive on them from 12,000 feet, release its bomb at 2,000 feet, and return to the carrier. If enemy fighters appeared, doctrine was clear: evade and escape. Let the wildcats handle it. The Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0, designated Zero Sen by the Imperial Japanese Navy, was the finest carrier fighter in the Pacific. It weighed 5,313 pounds fully loaded, nearly 4,000 pounds lighter than the Dauntless. It had a top speed of 331 miles per hour, 80 miles per hour faster than the SBD. It could climb at 3,100 feet per minute, versus the Dauntless's 1,270 feet per minute. It mounted two 20mm cannons and two 7.7mm machine guns, and its pilots had been fighting in China since 1937. The SBD versus Zero mathematics were brutal. The Zero could outclimb the Dauntless by a factor of 2.5. It could outrun the Dauntless by 80 miles per hour. It could outturn the Dauntless by a factor of 1.7. In every measurable category, the Zero was superior in air-to-air combat. Navy doctrine was explicit: if Zeros appear and no friendly fighters are available, dive for the water. Get low. Run. Under no circumstances engage. Vejtasa read the doctrine. He also watched his squadron mates practice deflection shooting. They aimed where the target was. He aimed where the target would be. The Montana jackrabbit method. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Yorktown was in the Atlantic, conducting neutrality patrols. Within weeks, the carrier steamed for the Pacific, arriving at San Diego on December 30th. The first months of 1942 were a catalogue of Allied disasters. Wake Island fell on December 23rd. Manila fell on January 2nd. Singapore fell on February 15th. The Dutch East Indies fell in March. Japan seemed unstoppable. The Zeros seemed invincible. Yorktown's Air Group 5 conducted the first American offensive strikes of the war. On February 1st, 1942, they hit Japanese targets in the Marshall and Gilbert Islands. On March 10th, during raids on enemy shipping near Salamaua and Lae in New Guinea, Vejtasa contributed to the destruction of 3 Japanese ships. For this action, he received his first Navy Cross, but it was the Battle of the Coral Sea that would define him and rewrite what the Navy believed possible. By early May 1942, Japanese forces were preparing Operation Emo, an amphibious assault on Port Moresby in New Guinea. If Port Moresby fell, Australia itself would be within range of Japanese bombers. The strategic implications were clear. Port Moresby must not fall. The Japanese assembled a powerful force: the light carrier Shoho, the fleet carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku, plus cruisers, destroyers, and troop transports. Against this, the Americans had 2 carriers, USS Yorktown and USS Lexington. Task Force 17 under Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher. Yorktown's Air Group 5 included Scouting Squadron 5, VS-5, with Lieutenant Stanley Vejtasa flying an SBD-3 Dauntless, Bureau number unknown, with his radio man and rear gunner in the back seat. On May 4th, Yorktown's aircraft struck Japanese forces at Tulagi in the Solomon Islands. Vejtasa flew multiple missions that day. On his second sortie, he shared credit for destroying a Japanese Zero float plane, a Nakajima A6M2N. This was a seaplane variant, slower and less maneuverable than the standard Zero. But it was still a kill, and it planted an idea. The standard doctrine said dive bombers could not fight fighters, but Vejtasa had watched the Zero float plane's pilot, watched how he maneuvered, watched how he reacted. The Japanese pilots were aggressive. They pressed attacks. They assumed their targets would flee. What if a target did not flee? What if a target turned into the attack? This was not in any manual. No instructor at Pensacola had suggested it, but Montana taught one lesson above all others. When you are being hunted, sometimes the prey must become the hunter. May 7th, 1942, dawned clear over the Coral Sea. American scout planes located the Japanese light carrier Shoho approximately 200 miles north of the American task force. At 09:26, Yorktown launched her strike. Lexington followed minutes later. Vejtasa was part of the first wave. His SBD carried a 1,000-pound bomb under the center line. He climbed to 12,000 feet with the rest of VS-5, searching for the Shoho below. They found her at 1100 hours, steaming at 25 knots, launching aircraft, desperately trying to get fighters aloft to defend herself. She never got the chance. Yorktown's dive bombers screamed down from 12,000 feet. Vejtasa pushed over into his dive, airspeed building past 270 miles per hour. The perforated dive flaps keeping the aircraft from accelerating beyond control. At 2,000 feet, he released, felt the bomb separate, pulled back hard on the stick, vision graying at the edges from the G-forces. His bomb was one of approximately 12 direct hits that struck Shoho in a span of minutes. The Japanese carrier was overwhelmed, fires spreading, secondary explosions ripping through her hangar deck. At 11:35, Shoho rolled over and sank. It was the first aircraft carrier lost by Japan in the entire war. A turning point, but not the action that would make Vejtasa famous. That would come the next day. May 8th, 1942. The two main Japanese fleet carriers, Shokaku and Zuikaku, had not been located. Intelligence suggested they were somewhere in the Coral Sea, possibly searching for the American carriers, just as the Americans were searching for them. At 06:25, Yorktown launched a dawn search. Aircraft fanned out across the ocean, looking for the enemy. At 08:20, a Japanese reconnaissance aircraft was spotted near the American task force. The enemy knew where they were. At 0900, radar detected incoming Japanese aircraft, 70-plus planes, heading directly for the American carriers. The Japanese had found Yorktown and Lexington before the Americans could locate the Japanese carrier's exact position. Yorktown scrambled every available Wildcat fighter for combat air patrol, but there were not enough. The carrier had launched most of her strike aircraft to find the Japanese carriers. The fighters that remained were spread thin, trying to cover two carriers against a massive incoming raid. Rear Admiral Fletcher needed every aircraft aloft, including the dive bombers. At 08:45, VS-5 received orders to launch an anti-torpedo plane patrol. Their mission was to fly a protective barrier around Yorktown, intercept any torpedo bombers that penetrated the fighter screen, and, if possible, shoot them down before they could release their torpedoes. It was a defensive mission, not an offensive one. The SBDs were not expected to dogfight Zeros. They were expected to catch slow Nakajima B-5N Kate torpedo bombers making their final runs, spray them with .50 caliber fire, and break up their attacks. Vejtasa launched at 08:42. His rear gunner, whose name has been lost to incomplete records, manned the .30 caliber flexible mount behind him. They climbed to 8,000 feet, took up their patrol station west of Yorktown, and waited. At 08:47, Vejtasa spotted them. Not Kate torpedo bombers, not Val dive bombers, but Zeros, 12 of them, descending from 15,000 feet in a coordinated attack on the anti-torpedo patrol. There were no American fighters available. The Wildcats were engaged elsewhere, chasing Vals, trying to protect the carriers from the main strike. The SBDs of the anti-torpedo patrol were on their own. Standard doctrine said, run, get low, evade. Let the fighters handle it. But there were no fighters, and running meant leaving Yorktown exposed. Vejtasa keyed his radio and told the other SBD pilots what he intended to do: turn into the attack and fight. Some thought he was insane. A dive bomber against a Zero was suicide. The mathematics were clear, but Vejtasa had watched the Zero pilots. He had seen how they attacked. They came in high and fast, confident, aggressive, expecting their targets to flee. They set up perfect overhead passes because no one ever challenged them directly. What if someone challenged them directly? At 08:49, the first Zero made its pass. Diving from 2 o'clock high, guns winking, Vejtasa did not dive for the water. He did not flee. He turned into the attack, hauling the heavy Dauntless around to face the Zero head-on. The Japanese pilot had not expected this. His firing pass was predicated on a fleeing target, a descending target, a predictable target. Instead, the SBD swung toward him, its twin 50 calibers aligned. Vejtasa squeezed the trigger, deflection shooting, lead the target, aim where it will be, not where it is. The 50 caliber tracers walked across the Zero's flight path. The Japanese pilot tried to break away. Too late. Rounds struck the engine cowling. The cockpit, the Zero shuddered, rolled, trailed smoke, and plunged toward the Coral Sea. 0851. Kill one. The remaining Zeros did not disengage. They pressed the attack. Professional pilots, veterans of months of combat. They had never seen a dive bomber fight back like this. But they had also never failed to destroy a target they had committed to. 3 Zeros rolled in on Vejtasa simultaneously, from different angles, trying to overwhelm his ability to track them all. His rear gunner opened fire on the one approaching from 6 o'clock, the 30 caliber chattering short bursts, keeping that Zero honest, forcing it to jink and weave rather than settle into a stable firing solution. Vejtasa focused on the 2 forward threats. He could not outrun them. He could not outclimb them. He could not outturn them in a sustained horizontal fight. But he had one advantage they had not accounted for. The SBD Dauntless was built to dive. It was built to plunge toward the Earth at near vertical angles and hold together. Its airframe was stressed for maneuvers that would tear the wings off lighter aircraft. Vejtasa rolled inverted, pulled through into a split S, and dove. The Zeros followed, but the Zero had a weakness. At high speeds, above 250 miles per hour, its controls stiffened. The same light weight that gave it such agility at slow speeds made it difficult to handle in high-speed dives. The pilot had to muscle the stick, fight the aircraft. Vejtasa's Dauntless, heavier, with hydraulically boosted controls designed for dive bombing, remained responsive. At 300 miles per hour indicated airspeed. He pulled out of his dive, rolled hard left, and found himself on the tail of a Zero whose pilot had been unable to follow his maneuver. 200 yards, 150 yards, 100 yards. Vejtasa opened fire, both 50s, short controlled bursts, walking the tracers into the Zero's tail, then up the fuselage. The Zero's fuel tanks were unarmored. They had sacrificed protection for performance. A single incendiary round in the wrong place. The Zero exploded at 0854, a fireball of aviation gasoline and magnesium. Killed 2. The other SBDs in the patrol were fighting for their lives. Some were shot down. The Zeros were too many, too fast, too experienced. Vejtasa watched one of his squadron mates spiral into the ocean, trailing fire. No parachute, but the patrol had bought time. The Zeros committed to attacking the SBDs were Zeros not attacking Yorktown. Every minute the dive bombers occupied the enemy fighters was a minute the carrier had to maneuver, to bring her anti-aircraft guns to bear, to recover aircraft. The battle was chaos. Aircraft everywhere, tracers crisscrossing the sky, The distant thunder of anti-aircraft fire from the carriers below. Smoke columns from burning planes marking where pilots had died. Vejtasa had fired approximately 300 rounds. He had 1,100 remaining. His rear gunner had expended 600 rounds, 400 remaining. They were low on ammunition, damaged, a hydraulic line leaking somewhere behind the cockpit. But still flying, a single Zero made another pass, coming in from 7 o'clock low, an unusual angle. The pilot perhaps trying something different after watching two of his comrades die. Vejtasa's rear gunner saw him first, opened fire. The Zero broke off and came around for another try. This pilot was good. He varied his approach, never came in the same way twice, forced Vejtasa to keep turning. Burning fuel, burning ammunition, wearing down the SBD's ability to fight. At 0907, the Zero made a mistake. He came in too steep, too fast, trying to catch Vejtasa in a climbing turn. The angle was wrong, the deflection was wrong. Vejtasa saw it, reversed his turn, and pulled the nose up hard. For a fraction of a second, the Zero was flying directly into his gun sight, crossing his nose at 180 yards. The Montana Jackrabbit shot. He fired 40 rounds, maybe 50. The tracers intersected the Zero's path. The aircraft staggered. The engine coughed black smoke. The pilot fought for control, almost recovered. Then the engine seized, and the Zero went into the water in a flat spin. 0908. Kill 3. Vejtasa was now an ace, sort of. His 3 Zero kills added to the float plane kill from May 4th, and his shared credit from the Shoho attack gave him enough points to qualify. But more importantly, he had done something Navy doctrine said could not be done. A dive bomber had engaged the best fighter in the Pacific and won. The surviving Zeros disengaged. Their attack on the anti-torpedo patrol had cost them 3 aircraft, plus additional planes damaged. They had shot down several SBDs, but they had not swept the patrol from the sky, and they had paid a price. Vejtasa nursed his damaged Dauntless back to Yorktown. The hydraulic leak had worsened. The landing would be interesting. He entered the pattern at 0931, trapped aboard at 0934. His aircraft was so badly damaged, it would never fly again. The deck crew counted 17 bullet holes in the fuselage and wings. One round had passed through the cockpit 6 inches from his head. Another had severed a hydraulic line that controlled the wing flaps. The aircraft was junk, but the pilot was alive. And so were the men on Yorktown who would have died if the Zeros had pressed their attack on the carrier. The Battle of the Coral Sea ended in a tactical draw, but a strategic American victory. USS Lexington was sunk. USS Yorktown was damaged. But the Japanese invasion of Port Moresby was turned back. Australia was saved, and Japan had lost the light carrier Shoho plus significant damage to Shokaku. But for the naval aviation community, something else had happened, something the manuals would have to account for. A dive bomber had shot down 3 Zeros in a single engagement. Initial reactions were skeptical. Officers who had not been there questioned the claims. 3 Zeros by a dive bomber pilot. Impossible. Must have been misidentification. Must have been damaged aircraft that crashed on their own. Must have been luck. Vejtasa's wingmen confirmed the kills. His rear gunner confirmed the kills. The gun camera footage, such as it was, confirmed the kills. But the skeptics persisted. Commander William Birch, commanding officer of VS-5, was not skeptical. He had seen the combat. He had seen the results. He put Vejtasa in for the Navy Cross. His second, Captain Elliot Buckmaster, commanding officer of Yorktown, approved the recommendation. Rear Admiral Fletcher endorsed it. The citation would note that Lieutenant Vejtasa, flying a type of aircraft explicitly not designed for air combat, had destroyed 3 enemy fighters through exceptional airmanship and gunnery. But the real proof came from an unexpected source: the enlisted men. Word spread through the fleet with the speed that only sailors can achieve. A dive bomber pilot named Swede had killed 3 Zeros. Not in a Wildcat, not in any fighter. In an SBD, the slow bus, the truck with wings. The aircraft, they joked, was an easy kill for any half-competent Zero pilot. Pilots began asking questions. What had he done differently? How had he survived? What was the technique? The answers were deceptively simple. 1. Turn into the attack, not away from it. The Zero pilot expects you to run. Force him to change his plan. 2. Use the vertical. The SBD can dive harder and recover faster than a Zero at high speed. The Zero's controls stiffen above 250. Use that. 3. Use your rear gunner. He has a 360-degree field of fire behind you. The Zero pilot has to respect that weapon or die. 4. Aim where the target will be, not where it is. Deflection shooting, lead the target. The same skill that kills jackrabbits in Montana kills Zeros in the Coral Sea. 5. The Zero has no armor. One good burst can kill it. You do not need sustained fire. You need one moment of perfect alignment. These lessons were not in any manual. They had been learned in combat by a pilot who should have died but did not. Enlisted men began passing them along. Radio men who flew as rear gunners started practicing their deflection shooting. SBD pilots started thinking about combat tactics they had been told never to use. The officers noticed. Some were uncomfortable. Dive bombers were supposed to dive bomb, not dogfight. If SBD pilots started thinking of themselves as fighter pilots, discipline would suffer. Doctrine existed for a reason, but the pilots who had to fly the missions saw it differently. Vejtasa had survived because he fought back. The pilots who died had followed doctrine and been slaughtered anyway. When a Zero showed up and there were no Wildcats around, what exactly was the alternative to fighting? Yorktown limped back to Pearl Harbor for emergency repairs. The damage from Coral Sea was extensive. She needed weeks in dry dock. She would get 3 days. On June 4th, 1942, Yorktown would fight again at Midway. She would be sunk, but not before her aircraft helped destroy 4 Japanese carriers and turn the tide of the Pacific War. Vejtasa was not aboard for Midway. He had been transferred. In May 1942, the Navy made a decision. A pilot who could kill 3 Zeros in a dive bomber might be even more dangerous in a fighter. Lieutenant Stanley Vejtasa was reassigned to Fighting Squadron 10, VF-10, the Grim Reapers, flying the Grumman F-4F-4 Wildcat from USS Enterprise. CV-6. The transfer was recognition and validation. The brass might not admit it publicly, but privately they knew what Vejtasa had proven. Skill mattered more than equipment. Tactics mattered more than doctrine. A pilot who understood these things was too valuable to leave in a dive bomber. October 26, 1942. The Battle of Santa Cruz Islands. By now, the Guadalcanal campaign was consuming both navies. Ship after ship, aircraft after aircraft, pilot after pilot. The attrition was staggering. The Japanese had more carriers, but they were running out of trained pilots. The Americans had fewer carriers, but they were building more. Enterprise and Hornet faced the Japanese carriers Shokaku, Zuikaku, Zuiho, and Junyo, the largest carrier battle since Midway. Vejtasa launched in his Wildcat as part of the Combat Air Patrol. His mission was to protect Enterprise from incoming Japanese strike aircraft, Vals and Kates, dive bombers and torpedo bombers, the same types he had once flown against as an SBD pilot. What happened next became legend. The Japanese attack was massive, wave after wave. Vejtasa and the other Wildcat pilots were outnumbered 5-1, 10-1. the sky filled with enemy aircraft. In the space of approximately 30 minutes, Lieutenant Stanley Vejtasa destroyed 7 Japanese aircraft, 2 Val dive bombers and 5 Kate torpedo bombers. He became an ace in a day. His actions that morning are credited with saving Enterprise from at least 2 torpedo hits that could have sunk her. His squadron commander, Commander John Flatley, recommended Vejtasa for the Medal of Honor. The recommendation was downgraded to a 3rd Navy Cross. Historians still debate why. Some suggest bureaucratic inertia. Others suggest that Vejtasa's blunt refusal to play politics had made enemies in the wrong places. Regardless, by October 1942, Stanley Vejtasa had accumulated 10 1/4 aerial victories, 3 in a dive bomber, 7 1/4 in a fighter, a record that would never be matched. The Japanese noticed, in intelligence reports recovered after the war. Japanese naval aviation analysts documented a shift in American tactics beginning in mid-1942. Specifically, they noted that American dive bomber pilots had begun engaging fighters rather than fleeing. A report from the Yokosuka Naval Air Technical Arsenal, dated November 1942, noted that several Zero pilots had been lost to SBD gunfire in circumstances that suggested deliberate engagement rather than defensive action. The report recommended caution when attacking American dive bombers, noting that the SBD's forward-firing armament and the skill of its rear gunners made it a more dangerous target than previously assumed. Japanese pilots who had dominated the skies since December 1941 were now being warned to be careful around dive bombers. This was Vejtasa's legacy, not just the 3 Zeros he personally destroyed, but the change in mindset he inspired. If an SBD could kill a Zero, then every SBD became a potential threat. Every engagement became a risk. The mathematical certainty that had given Japanese pilots such confidence was no longer certain. By 1943, the tide had turned. American industrial production was flooding the Pacific with new aircraft and new carriers. The Zero's advantages in speed and maneuverability were being matched by the Grumman F-6F Hellcat. The era of Japanese air superiority was ending. But the men who had fought through the dark days of 1942, who had held the line when the mathematics said they could not, they knew that something more than industrial production had saved the Pacific Fleet. Innovation, adaptation, the willingness to throw away the manual when the manual was getting people killed. Vejtasa had shown them how. The war ended on September 2nd, 1945. Lieutenant Commander Stanley Vejtasa continued to serve. He had found a home in the Navy. The poor kid from Montana who had enlisted to eat was now a decorated combat veteran. A leader, a man whose opinion on aerial tactics carried weight. He served as air boss on various carriers, commanded VIAF 97, commanded Air Group 44. Rose through the ranks with a steady competence that marked everything he did. No flash, no glory seeking, just the job done right. He achieved the rank of captain, a remarkable rise for a man who had enlisted as a seaman in 1937. He served through the Korean War, through the Cold War, through the transformation of naval aviation from propellers to jets. On an unrecorded date in 1970, Captain Stanley W. Vejtasa retired from the United States Navy after 33 years of service. He returned to civilian life, to the obscurity that awaits most veterans. He settled in California, eventually moving to Escondido in San Diego County, the kind of quiet retirement community where former warriors go to garden and watch their grandchildren grow. His wife Irene had been with him through all of it. The deployments, the moves, the long absences that military families endure. They raised 3 children, Jean, Dan, and Susan. They had grandchildren, then great-grandchildren, a family built in the margins of service. Vejtasa rarely spoke of the war. When his grandchildren asked about the medals, he would shrug. When historians came calling, he would answer their questions briefly and change the subject. He was not modest so much as uninterested in dwelling on events that had happened half a century before. The neighbors knew him as Swede, the quiet old man who kept his lawn neat and never talked about himself. They did not know about the 3 zeros, about the 7 kills at Santa Cruz, about the 3 Navy Crosses. They knew an elderly man who watched baseball and complained about the weather. Irene passed away in September 2004. After more than 60 years together, Vejtasa continued on, alone, in the way that the very old often continue, habit and stubbornness carrying him through each day. On January 23, 2013, Captain Stanley W. Vejtasa died at the age of 98 in Escondido, California. His obituary was brief. It mentioned his Navy service, his decorations, his family. It did not mention the 3 zeros destroyed in an aircraft that doctrine said could not fight fighters. It did not mention the change in mindset he had inspired. The enlisted men who had passed along his lessons. The pilots who had survived because they fought back instead of running. At his request, there was no memorial service. His ashes were scattered at sea, returned to the Pacific where he had made his name, where he had proven that skill matters more than speed, that innovation beats doctrine when survival demands it, that authority is not always right. He was survived by his children Jean, Dan, and Susan, 4 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. None of them would know what it felt like to turn a dive bomber into an attacking zero, to squeeze the trigger and watch an enemy fighter fall, to defy the mathematics and win. But they knew he had done it, and that was enough. And today, the lessons Vejtasa learned in the Coral Sea are taught at the United States Navy Fighter Weapons School. Top Gun. The principle of turning into an attack rather than fleeing it, of using an aircraft's specific strengths rather than fighting to its weaknesses, of deflection shooting and target leading. These are fundamentals now. No one teaches them as Vejtasa's tactics. The manuals credit engineering analysis and doctrinal refinement. The name of the Montana farm boy who proved them in combat is rarely mentioned. This is how military institutions work. Innovation is absorbed, systematized, credited to committees. The individuals who bled to prove the concepts are forgotten. The SBD Dauntless itself went on to become the most successful dive bomber of World War II, credited with sinking more Japanese shipping than any other Allied aircraft type. At Midway alone, SBDs destroyed 4 Japanese fleet carriers in a span of 5 minutes, changing the course of the Pacific War. The aircraft earned nicknames from the men who flew it. Slow but deadly was one. Barge was another. The official designation was Scout Bomber Douglas, but the pilots just called it the SBD and knew what it could do in the right hands. Several SBDs survive today in museums around the world. At the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum, visitors can see an SBD-5 variant, later model than the SBD-3 Vejtasa flew, but close enough to give a sense of scale. The cockpit is cramped, the controls are heavy, the visibility is limited by the long engine cowling. Standing next to the aircraft, it is impossible not to think of what it must have been like. At 8,000 feet over the Coral Sea, 12 zeros descending, no help coming, nothing but skill and stubbornness between you and the ocean below, and then turning into the attack. At 08:47 on the morning of May 8, 1942, Lieutenant Stanley Vejtasa banked his Douglas SBD-3 Dauntless over the Coral Sea and watched 12 Japanese zeros descend on his patrol. The mathematics said he should die. The doctrine said he should run. The officers who had never flown combat said it was impossible to fight. Vejtasa turned into the attack. He fired. The first zero fell at 08:51, the second at 08:54, the third at 09:08. A dive bomber pilot had killed 3 fighters, because he refused to accept that it could not be done. 70 years later, an old man died quietly in California. No parades, no monuments, just ashes scattered at sea. But somewhere, in the curriculum of every naval aviator, in the reflexes of every pilot who turns to engage rather than fleeing, in the fundamental understanding that doctrine is a guide and not a god, Swede Vej Taasa is still flying.